So we had a presentation with many slides, and then we saw Ed Moss's presentation, and then Sasha's presentation. We took another 3 slides off, and then so we ended up. Now we seriously we did reduce the number of slides because we don't want to reiterate everything that's been said already. And perhaps, just, we do have some slides, but have some time also to discuss with you whatever comes up. And so this first slide is Jaume that made. I didn't do this, but he made this little animation. The Dutch football team.
Spain is a bit shaky.
All right. So a little bit like our previous speaker, similar to our previous speakers, is we want to stress, and this I do it here, but I also do it when I am with the parents in the room. I want to stress that there are certain basic things that all children need, and actually not all children, all persons need, regardless whether they have a genetic condition. They need to learn and to develop in a safe environment. And there's also something that's really difficult for most people, I would say all people, that is when they're in an environment where the demands, what is expected of them, exceeds what your possibilities are. It's difficult for all of us. So the challenge for every child and for the parents is to provide an environment that stimulates growth and development of new skills, while at the same time avoiding a situation of too much or over expectation. And in many children with the 20q11 deletion syndrome, this balance is just very difficult to achieve and to maintain. But it's a normal balance. You want to have this balance for all of your children, but it's just so much more challenging when your children have special needs. So this is the first thing I wanted to say. Now, the other thing is that if there is this mismatch, if this balance isn't not in balance, this is out of balance for too long between what a child can do and what is expected of him, you can invariably see stress coming up. The child will not be doing well. In the normal population, and please note that, put that between brackets because we don't know exactly what is normal, but in a normal population, when you and I become stressed, you notice that. And somebody else will say, you're stressed, you should sleep a little more, perhaps tune down your work a little bit, have a drink, not too much. That's it. So, but anyway, you have these manners, yet these ways of correcting too much stress. In children and patients with deletion syndrome, when there is this mismatch, it sort of teams up with the genetic vulnerability. So the mismatch and the stress occurs in this context of a genetically determined vulnerability for psychiatric problems. So in terms of balance and stress, there are 2 things. The first thing is, no, there are 3 things. The first thing is we all need good balance in our lives. Okay, that's an easy thing to say. And the second thing is that the same accounts for persons with the 20q11 deletion syndrome, but it's just so much more demanding, challenging to find that balance and to keep that balance. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that if there is a situation of disbalance and it's there too long, the consequence is more serious in general because there's this genetic vulnerability. I hand over the microphone to my friend here.
So, as Jacob was saying, and then you can have pathology, yeah? So this graph just shows you how there is an evolution of pathology over the development of the children. So if you look at the graph, you'll see how the schizophrenia spectrum disorders increase with time. You'll see how the ADHD, which is in purple, decreases with time, as do the disruptive disorders, The mood disorders, as you can see, they sort of increase, and then around age 18 stabilize, more or less, and they fall. And the anxiety disorders are more or less stable. They come a bit up and a bit down, but they more or less maintain. Jacob has done this graph in minutes. He's incredible. He's a musician with the computer, so people is very worried about psychosis, parents are worried about psychosis. So you can see that there is psychotic difficulties and that they increase with time. So, but we have to be aware and we have to be vigilant for it. But what we do have is that we have all these names that really are very useful. We can understand each other, we can do research, we can communicate with colleagues. I'm sure that the parents of Spanish children will know that if you don't have one of these diagnoses, going to the school, going to education, going to social services, and demanding services is far more difficult. So they have their uses, they are good, but when you have a child in front of you and you need to treat it and you need to manage the difficulties, sometimes it's probably more helpful to think of difficulties in an spectrum, to say it somehow, difficulties in attention and planning, in social cognitive, in anxiety, affective symptoms, and in the psychotic sphere. Yeah? So we'll just give you some clues of things that can be happened. So the attention executive deficits, children are usually absorbed into their own world. They do not pay attention. Sometimes they have difficulties in school. Sometimes they don't seem to listen. Teachers say, well, that doesn't listen to me. Or they seem that they can be easily distracted. Organizing things is a bit more complex. They need more time. They have to redo things. They have to repeat things. And for this group of children, the symptoms of hyperactivity and impulsivity that we see in many other children, they are not that common. So they have ADHD spectrum, but it's mainly the inattentive type, to say it somehow. With regard to social cognitive deficits, we know that they are not related to the level of intelligence, so not that the bright children will be better socially than the not so bright. And you know, the things that we see, the things that we can appreciate, that there is difficulties in this sphere, are that they show poor eye-to-eye contact, they have difficulties in playing with others. You know, most of these things have already been said, you've already listened to this morning. They have difficulties in sharing their enjoyment, sometimes they can be overly friendly. Difficulties in reading, reacting to, or reacting to social clues. And they show poor reciprocity. So at times, maintaining a conversation and sharing things with them is a bit difficult. And they usually like, or they can like a repetition, and they're a bit inflexible at times. With regards to the area of anxiety and affective disorders, what we can see is they are very common from childhood onwards, reaches up to 60% at least. And they also don't like changes, so we can see how the symptoms are getting mixed. They don't like changes. They sometimes have fear of a specific sounds, like can be sound, of a specific things, like could be sounds or insects. And sometimes they are very fearful of thunderstorms, of noise. And then the depression will peak in adolescence, so is rarer in the younger years. And then it peaks, and then it sort of maintains, as we saw earlier. And these children or these adolescents will be sad, they can be irritable, they will have mood swings, their mood will vary a lot. In adolescence, is different from adults, in which the depressed mood keeps and is maintained. There is more change. They don't enjoy things as they used to do, and they have trouble sleeping, and sometimes they lose their appetite. Yeah? In the psychosis sphere of symptoms, that we have to differentiate that psychotic symptoms or psychotic in this sphere is not the same as a disorder. So, but in adults, you have 20-30%, and probably Anne later on will tell you more about it, of children well, there won't be children. And what can happen in these kind of difficulties that the children will have will hear or see or feel strange things that nobody else can hear or see or feel. Sometimes they will think that something is going to happen. They cannot explain themselves very well, but they have this impending doom coming. Sometimes they think that people are against them, that they sometimes feel that things that are daily happenings, day-to-day happenings, are somehow directed to them. They have special meaning for themselves, for them, and that all these things relate to them in a special way. Well, we get.
So, unavoidable. So we need to sort of explain, we try to do it very quickly, how we categorize symptoms and how we draw diagnosis from them. But of course, a diagnosis is a description, but it's not, you know, you have to translate that to what really happens into your daily life and why it is important. So a diagnosis is not the end point. It's a tool for us. It's a tool for us so we can think about what treatment, what intervention is needed. And this is a very pragmatic approach, and I recognize, I have to say, Ed Moss had also something quite similar. But this is really what we do. If we sit down with you and your child, we want to know what is the profile of competencies and limitations. So what, and again, you know, we all have such profiles, but you know, I try to point out in the beginning that since maintaining the balance is more challenging, you have to understand better what the profile is. So insight in the profile is important. The cognitive profile, Ed has talked about that. Neuropsych evaluation can be very important in that regard. What are the abilities in terms of concentration, impulse regulation? What are the social abilities, communication, skills, flexibilities to deal with different situations? So you see, those are the domains that Jaume just discussed, but now I don't discuss it in terms of a diagnosis, but more as an overall, you know, sort of to understand the competencies and the limitations of your child, regardless whether we should call it ADHD or not, or whether we should call it autism or not, regardless. Because we should look at that profile of behavioral competence. Okay, and why? Well, it's because of that, that balance that is so important, because one could construct that at least during adolescence, childhood and adolescence, if this balance is not well maintained, you will see symptoms of decompensation. You will see depressive symptoms arise, anxiety arise, and perhaps even psychotic symptoms arise. Now there's one caveat I want to stress here. This is not to say that if your child develops a depression that you've done a bad job in maintaining the balance. Don't turn it around. Because I've seen many kids, and that's the reality of it, they develop psychotic symptoms, and they were, as far as everybody could see, in a perfect balance. Okay, it's not, don't reason the other way around, that's the danger of this reasoning. However, I do point it out because I do think that stress and maintaining balance is something that you, as parents and all the people involved, can work on. That we have no tools to change the genetic makeup of your child, but this is something you can do something. So this is why I pointed out, but don't change the reasoning backwards and say, okay, now my child has developed depressive symptoms, so I've done bad in maintaining the balance. Okay? Very good with this, it's important. Okay? So it's this genetic risk that your child has for developing these different types of psychopathology that makes it so much important to look at the role of stress and how you can minimize that stress. Okay, so a very global diagram here, but let's imagine that this is. Oh, okay, good. That's a nice guy. Okay, so let's say that this is a developmental trajectory. You know, when a child is very young, he's not able to tie his laces, his shoelaces, and then at some point he learns to tie his shoelaces, goes to walk, well, probably the other way around, and then go to school, you know, and all those developmental milestones. And this is a normal developmental trajectory. And the interesting thing is that for most children, there's the demands of the environment are in keeping with this developmental trajectory. what I mean is very simple. What I mean is, you will not, nobody in his right mind will ask a 5-year-old child to say, okay, can you go to Carrefour, buy me some stuff, here's my money, and because a 5-year-old can do that. But you can ask a 15-year-old. Okay, so the demands are increasing. Now, this could be a very schematic developmental trajectory of a child with deletion. It just goes slower. Okay, it will probably not reach the same level. And why I point this out is that what you want to see is that, what you want to appreciate is that the discrepancy between what your environment is expecting from you and what your real capacities are, they tend to become larger with time. Okay? That is, and it's something we can see, because many parents will say, you know, in primary school, when he was 5 years, 6 years, 7, and he still was able to manage, went to school normally, everything was okay, and you know, we thought everything was, and then 8 years, 10 years, it becomes more difficult, and with peer contacts, and whatever is the academic part of it. So that's something we really see very often. Okay, Jaume. So,
so how you evaluate what's different? How do you know if what a child is doing is normal, is not normal? Sometimes it's not easy. So when you do it, well, all the time at any time. You know, as you do with your other children. So if you see something different, you see something and say, well, that's not quite right, then just talk to one of us. We're nice people. Usually. Sometimes it's very difficult to appreciate. Sometimes it's not as easy. And since you see your children every day, since you don't see anything different, then probably you don't know any better. So when is it that these symptoms are coming to the forefront? Well, usually when you can compare, when you go somewhere and you see other children. Comparing is not nice, but it's very useful, especially for doctors and child psychiatrists, I would say. But you can compare when you go to the park and you see other children play, and say, well, my child is not doing exactly the same as they are doing. So when you are going to birthdays and to other kinds of parties, where there's lots of children playing together, and you start playing with them, but not quite with them, start playing by side. So at transitions, when you start to school, when you go to primary, when you go to secondary, and when the milestones are supposed to be had. So by 1 year, they should be talking and walking, or having some words and walking, and by 2 years, they should be able to do sentences. You can see how probably other children do it or not. What else? Where else? Who else can make a difference? Well, people with experience. So and who has experience? Grandparents, relatives, friends, teachers and educators. So sometimes you say, oh, you know, it seems that your child had some difficulty, or ask them, or probably they won't say it to you. But so I think we need to listen to them. I'm meaning mainly for the psychiatric difficulties or for the mental health difficulties. People that you are in intermittent contact with, because they will see the child at one point, and then they will see them later on, and they will say, well, it hasn't changed, or it changed too much. And people who can easily compare behaviors. Teachers, I think, is a clear example. They have lots of children of the same age in the same room, and they can do it very easily.
Sorry. Those are the last 2 slides. I'm just going to say what I try to do, and I think when we discussed this morning, I think Jaume does the same thing. When I meet parents, and I'm very honest about it. I really like my job, and I also find it each time quite an honor. Like, you know, there's people that don't know me at all. They sit down and they will tell intimate things about, you know, concerns and worries about their lives, about the life of their child. So that's really important. First, to start to listen. And I'm not particularly a modest person, I believe, but I do think that I know quite a lot about child behavior. That's my training. So that's okay. I'm not afraid of saying it. But however, when I'm in the room with you, you know your child better than I do. You are the specialist, so you really have to listen very carefully. And I would also turn this around. When you're in the room with one of my fellow child psychiatrists and you feel that the person in front of you is not listening, you change child psychiatrist. It's not a good one. No, it's because your child needs a really a good child psychiatrist. I'm perfectly honest about it. It's really important. I will admit to you that if there's something I don't understand, if I don't know, I will just tell you and say, okay, I haven't seen this before, or I'm not sure whether this is a psychosis. Could be, but I'm not sure. I'm not going to reassure you if I'm not sure. I will be confident if I know. So I also will tell a parent, I'm so sorry to tell you that there is a psychosis. We need to treat it. I'm not going to wait for another 3 months to see what's going to happen. And then, we really need to move on with the treatment. Don't lose time. And not only is it important, it's not only important to look at the problems. You say, okay, there's a depression or not, or psychosis or not, or obviously that is important. But it's also important to take time to search with the parents and the children, what are the possibilities for growth? And a very practical example for an adolescent, young adult, will be at some point the child or the adolescent doesn't have a driver's license, and then at some point he or she has. That's a milestone. But very often your kids will have different milestones, but they're as important. That's the message. They're as important. At some point, your kid will not be able, has not been able to learn how to brush his or her teeth. And then one day he's able to brush his teeth. That's as big as a milestone as getting your driver's license. So you really have to appreciate that with your child. Last thing is a slide that Jaume put in just to convince you that we are very nice people. I don't know if you can read it, but the first thing said, child psychiatry, where imaginary friends are taken to their weapons.
In Spanish it says, psiquiatra infantil donde los amigos imaginarios mueren. The one at the bottom is something like, he wants to be a cop, and they two child psychiatrists, so is la del fondo a la izquierda dice, mi hijo quiere ser un policía, y lo lleva al psiquiatra infantil porque como podéis ver, padre y madre no son.
So I think we have some time left, 10 minutes or something, for this kind of.
We have time for some questions.
Yeah, so
yeah.
Perhaps you have some questions. Go ahead.